Disclaimer: this story is a fictional and dramatized emotional narrative intended for mature audiences only. It explores themes of infidelity, emotional conflict, and forbidden relationships, which may be sensitive to some readers. All characters are fictional and over the age of 18. The purpose of this story is purely for storytelling and entertainment. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. It was a Thursday afternoon when I came home earlier than usual. My shift had ended 2 hours ahead of schedule, and, honestly, I was looking forward to some alone time. The house was unusually quiet. No television blaring, no music echoing from upstairs, not even the usual clatter of dishes in the sink. I slipped off my heels at the door and tiptoed into the living room, enjoying the silence. But as I set my purse down, a faint, rhythmic noise caught my attention. It was distant, upstairs. I paused, squinting toward the staircase. My husband was at work, and my stepson, Jake, was the only one home. Or at least, he was supposed to be. I climbed the stairs slowly, the sound growing slightly louder. It wasn't music. It wasn't talking. It was something else, something private. My gut twisted. Was he crying? Hurt? I walked down the hallway toward Jake's room, stopping just outside his door. I hesitated, hand hovering near the doorknob. I didn't want to invade his privacy, but the concerned mother in me won. I nudged the door open gently. And then I froze. He didn't notice me at first. He was lying on his bed, shirt off, one hand between his legs, completely lost in his own world. My breath caught in my throat. My first instinct was to slam the door and pretend I hadn't seen anything, but I didn't move. I stood there, stunned, confused, unsure of how to react. Then, like he could sense my presence, Jake turned his head slightly, and our eyes met. Time stopped. My cheeks flushed. My lips parted, but no words came out. Jake's eyes widened for a split second, then narrowed into something else entirely, something bold. He didn't cover himself. He didn't yell or panic. He smirked. That smug, knowing smirk that unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. I gasped, suddenly aware of my stillness, and slammed the door shut, backing away from it like it was on fire. I raced to my bedroom, heart pounding, palms clammy, and head spinning. What had I just walked into? And more disturbingly, why was my mind still replaying his face? That look in his eyes? I locked my door and leaned against it, chest heaving. I tried to erase the image from my head, but it was already imprinted. Something about that moment felt forbidden, charged. And that scared me more than anything else. Was it just shock? Curiosity? Or something much darker? That night, I barely slept. No matter how tightly I closed my eyes, that moment kept flashing in my mind: Jake's gaze, the curve of his smirk, the heat rising in my chest. I told myself it was shock, a natural reaction to walking in on something so unexpected. But the more I tried to shake it off, the deeper it settled inside me. The next morning, I avoided coming out of my bedroom until I heard him leave for school. I couldn't face him, not yet. I didn't know what to say or how to act. Was he embarrassed? Did he even care? But what haunted me most wasn't what I saw. It was how he looked at me. It wasn't a panicked glance. It was deliberate, bold. Like he knew exactly what he was doing. And worse, like he knew what it did to me. By afternoon, I tried to regain some normalcy. I cleaned the house, made dinner, and kept my phone close to distract myself. Around 4:30, I heard the front door open. He was home. My heart skipped. I stayed in the kitchen, busying myself with dishes, pretending not to hear his footsteps coming closer. "Hey," he said casually, leaning against the counter. His voice was smooth, completely unbothered. "Hi," I replied, keeping my eyes on the soapy plate in my hands. My voice came out tighter than I expected. There was a pause. I could feel him watching me. "So, about yesterday," he began. I stiffened. "Don't," I cut him off quickly. "We don't need to talk about it. It was a mistake." I walked in without knocking. "That's on me." He chuckled under his breath, that same arrogant little sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "Sure," he said. "But you didn't walk away right away, did you?" I turned to him, glaring. "Excuse me?" He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "You stood there, staring. For a while. And then you slammed the door." I was speechless. How could he say it so casually? So confidently? I didn't mean to, I stammered. It was shocking, that's all. Was it? He asked, eyes scanning my face. Because to me, it looked like you were curious. I froze. Something about his tone, the challenge in his words, the way he tilted his head while watching my reaction, it was like he knew exactly how to push the buttons I didn't even know existed. I turned away, trying to gather my breath. Jake, stop. I'm your stepmother. This isn't funny. I'm not laughing, he said softly. I didn't respond. Because deep down, I was scared he was right. I wasn't laughing either. The days that followed were uncomfortable in ways I couldn't explain. Jake and I had slipped into a strange rhythm, one of avoidance laced with something electric. Something we both felt but didn't speak about. My husband, Kevin, was too busy with work to notice the shift. He came home late, kissed my forehead out of habit, and barely looked up from his laptop at dinner. I was thankful for that. I didn't want him to see the guilt written all over my face. Jake, on the other hand, had become a quiet storm moving through the house. He didn't say much, but his presence was louder than ever. I could feel it when he passed behind me in the hallway, when he sat at the dining table across from me, when he watched me too long from the couch while I pretended to be engrossed in whatever was playing on the TV. And yet, we never brought up that moment again. Still, I caught myself doing things I wasn't proud of, wearing slightly tighter clothes around the house, leaning a little more than necessary over the counter, taking longer to do my makeup even though I wasn't going anywhere. Was I doing it for me? Or for him? One morning, I bent down to pick up laundry from the basket in the hallway. I didn't realize Jake was behind me until I heard his voice low, teasing. You always wear that perfume when you're nervous. I jumped up and turned around. He was standing too close. I clutched the towel to my chest, my pulse racing. What are you talking about? I snapped. He smirked. The lavender one. You only spray it when you're trying to distract yourself. I'm not trying to distract myself, I lied. You sure? He asked, cocking his head. I stepped back, creating space between us. You're crossing a line, Jake. I didn't cross anything, he said smoothly. But you're the one who keeps pretending like that day didn't change things. I had no answer. That night, I avoided dinner with the excuse of a headache. I stayed in my room, lights off, blinds drawn. I stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I was imagining it all. That maybe it was a teenage boy being cocky, trying to mess with my head. But the way he spoke, the way he watched me, it was calculated. He knew exactly what he was doing. And I hated that a part of me didn't want him to stop. I told myself that if I just kept my distance, it would all fade. The tension, the guilt, the confusion. But deep inside, I already knew. I had crossed a boundary in my mind the day I stood in that doorway and didn't walk away. And now, there was no undoing that look. A week passed. I had grown used to avoiding Jake. I planned my movements around his schedule, waiting until he was in his room before stepping into the kitchen, taking my coffee to the bedroom instead of the living room, showering early in the morning before he even woke up. It wasn't healthy, and I knew it. But it felt safer than confronting the strange emotions bubbling inside me. Then one Saturday evening, the silence shattered. I was folding laundry in the living room, half watching a rerun on the TV, when Jake walked in. I didn't hear him at first, not until he cleared his throat. I looked up. He stood there in a plain white t-shirt and sweats, holding a glass of water. His expression wasn't smug this time. It was different. Soft. Almost nervous. Can we talk? He asked. I paused, unsure of whether to agree. I didn't want to give him the wrong idea again. But something in his voice caught me off guard. It wasn't teasing. It wasn't provocative. It was sincere. I nodded and sat down slowly. He remained standing, fidgeting with the glass. He started, then looked down at the floor. I want to say I'm sorry. About what happened. I stared at him, unsure of how to respond. He continued, I shouldn't have looked at you that way. I shouldn't have said those things. It was wrong. You're my stepmom, and I crossed the line. I wasn't expecting that. The mature way he spoke, the guilt in his eyes, it disarmed me. I know I've made you uncomfortable, he added. I don't know what came over me. I guess I've been confused. Things between Dad and you are cold. And sometimes, I think I mistook your kindness for something else. I swallowed hard, emotions tangling in my throat. He wasn't wrong. My marriage had been lifeless for a while. Kevin and I barely touched each other anymore, let alone talked about anything meaningful. But that didn't justify what was happening now. I appreciate you saying that, I said softly. Really? It takes a lot to own up to something like this. He nodded and started to turn away. But then he stopped, his back still facing me. But I also saw the way you looked at me that day, he whispered. It wasn't just shock, was it? My breath hitched. You don't have to answer, he added, before I could respond. I just wanted to know if I imagined it. Then, without waiting for my reply, he walked out of the room. I sat frozen, a towel still in my lap. His words lingered in the air like perfume, subtle, clinging, unforgettable. I didn't stop him. And I didn't say no. Because the truth was he hadn't imagined it. After that night, something in the air between us shifted again. Jake had apologized. He had acknowledged his behavior and, in some strange way, made me feel seen. He didn't justify what happened, but he also didn't deny the look we shared, that haunting moment neither of us had been able to forget. I told myself it was over, that now we could move on, that lines had been redrawn. But they hadn't. If anything, the apology opened a door neither of us had the strength to close. He started lingering longer around the house, helping me in the kitchen, bringing in groceries without being asked, fixing a leaky faucet that had been untouched for months. At first, I welcomed the help. It gave us something safe to focus on. But his presence became more than helpful, it became magnetic. One afternoon, I was sorting through mail at the dining table when he walked in and placed a cup of tea in front of me. He didn't say anything. He just set it down, gave me a small smile, and walked away. It was such a simple gesture, yet it felt intimate. Too intimate. Another time, I was in the laundry room reaching for a basket on the top shelf. He walked in behind me and reached over to grab it for me. His chest brushed against my back, and I froze. I didn't move. He handed me the basket slowly, then stood there, too close. Thanks, I said, voice dry. He didn't respond. He just stared, his eyes lingering a little too long before finally walking away. And I let it happen. Again and again. One evening, while Kevin was at work late, Jake came home from the gym, shirt clinging to his skin, hair damp with sweat. He grabbed a bottle of water and leaned against the kitchen counter, watching me cook. You always make the kitchen smell better than any restaurant, he said casually. I laughed nervously, stirring the pot. Flattery doesn't get you out of doing the dishes. I don't mind doing them, he said. Especially if it means spending more time near you. I turned my head sharply, trying to read his expression. Was it just playful? Or something more? He didn't flinch. I felt my face flush, but I didn't say anything. I should have. I should have shut it down right there. But I didn't. Because I had started craving the attention. The warmth. The way he looked at me, not like I was someone's wife, but like I was someone worth wanting. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, remembering his eyes, his words, the subtle moments we shared. Every time I thought about it, I told myself it was innocent. But deep down I knew. Innocence had left the house the moment I chose not to stop him. It was a Sunday afternoon when the first real crack broke through my restraint. Kevin had gone out of town for a weekend conference, something I was used to by now. Our marriage had become a practical arrangement more than a relationship. We shared a house, a schedule, even a bed, but not love. Not passion. Not desire. I spent the morning cleaning, lost in thought. Jake was still in his room, and the silence in the house felt heavier than usual. Every tick of the clock seemed louder. Every step I took echoed down the hall. Around noon, I was in the kitchen making lunch. I had just bent down to grab something from the lower cabinet when I felt it again, that quiet presence. Jake was standing in the doorway, his arms crossed, watching me. You always hum when you're cooking, he said. I straightened up, startled. Do I? He smiled. Yeah, it's kind of cute. My breath caught. I turned away quickly, focusing on the cutting board. You hungry? I asked, voice wavering. Starving, he replied. But he wasn't talking about food. I could feel it in his tone. He walked up beside me and reached past to grab a glass from the cabinet. His arm brushed mine, just barely, but it lingered long enough to make my skin tingle. I stepped away, but he didn't back off. He set the glass down, turned to face me fully. "I've tried to forget what happened," he said quietly, "but I can't." I stayed silent, the knife still in my hand, resting on the half-sliced tomato. "You can't either, can you?" he added. I swallowed. "Jake, I just want to know," he interrupted gently. "If it's all in my head, tell me. I'll stop." I finally looked at him. Really looked. His face was open, no smirk, no teasing, no arrogance. Just vulnerability. Honesty. And something inside me snapped. I stepped closer without realizing it. I didn't speak. I didn't move away. He watched me carefully, eyes locked on mine. Then slowly, as if giving me every chance to pull back, he leaned in. And I let him. His lips brushed against mine, soft and tentative at first. Just a whisper. But the moment they touched, the room faded. The kitchen, the dishes, the noise of the outside world, it all disappeared. All I could feel was heat. Pressure. Want. I didn't stop him. I kissed him back. It lasted only seconds, but it felt like something eternal had shifted. When we finally pulled apart, neither of us spoke. There was no apology. No denial. Just a silence so deep, it said everything. I turned away, breathing hard. My heart pounded in my chest like a war drum. I had kissed my stepson. Not by accident. Not in confusion. By choice. And I couldn't take it back. The next few days felt like walking a tightrope over fire. Everything outside looked the same. Kevin returned from his trip, the house resumed its quiet rhythm, and I played my part like nothing had changed. But inside me, everything had. I couldn't stop thinking about that kiss. The way Jake's lips had felt. The warmth of his breath against mine. The way I had melted into him. I told myself it was a mistake. A weak moment. I told myself it would end there. But it didn't. On Friday night, Kevin announced he had a late business dinner and wouldn't be home until after midnight. He kissed my cheek absently, grabbed his keys, and left. The door clicked shut behind him. I stood in the kitchen alone, barely breathing. Jake came down the stairs a few minutes later, freshly showered, wearing a simple t-shirt and sweats. Our eyes met, and that unspoken current between us surged again, stronger, heavier, undeniable. "I thought you'd be out tonight," I said, voice low. I was waiting for him to leave, he replied without hesitation. He walked closer, his eyes never leaving mine. I felt every part of my body tense, not from fear, but anticipation. My hands gripped the countertop behind me as he came to stand just inches away. "You don't have to pretend anymore," he whispered. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Because the truth was I wasn't pretending. I was just terrified of admitting what I wanted. He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers grazed my cheek. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. I didn't. Instead, I leaned in. Our mouths met again, this time with no hesitation. No guilt. Just hunger. His hands slid down my sides as I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him closer. We stumbled toward the couch, lips never parting. Every part of me felt alive, awakened in a way I hadn't felt in years. My breath was short, my heart racing, my body responding to every touch like it had been starved. There was no planning, no thinking. Just need. Just feeling. We crossed the line. The line we'd tiptoed around for days. We shattered it. It wasn't just the physical part, it was the intensity. The connection. The way he looked at me like I was everything. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt desired. I felt seen. When it was over, we lay there in silence. The lamp's warm light cast long shadows on the wall. He reached for my hand, and I didn't pull away. But as the silence grew heavier, so did reality. I sat up slowly, pulling the blanket over myself. "What have we done?" I whispered. Jake didn't answer. He just watched me with those eyes that still held desire, and now something deeper. Something terrifying. Something real. The next morning was painfully quiet. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, warm and bright, completely unaware of the wreckage it fell upon. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the blanket around me like it could shield me from the reality of what I'd done. Jake had left my room before dawn, silently, his eyes unreadable. No words. No promises. Just a lingering touch on my shoulder before he disappeared into the hallway. I hadn't moved since. My body still remembered everything: his hands, his lips, the way he whispered my name like it meant something more. But my mind was screaming. Guilt crashed over me in waves, making it hard to breathe. I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I was a wife. A stepmother. And now, I was something else. Something I never imagined I'd become. When Kevin came home later that morning, everything felt surreal. He wrapped his arms around me, kissed my cheek, and talked about his conference while I nodded along, my smile hollow. I couldn't look him in the eye. Every word out of his mouth felt like a betrayal I couldn't confess. Jake came downstairs like nothing had happened. Calm. Confident. He greeted his father, poured himself some coffee, and sat across from me at the table like we hadn't just crossed every boundary in the book. Our eyes met briefly. And in that split-second glance, a storm of emotions passed between us: desire, guilt, confusion, and something dangerously close to longing. Over the next few days, I tried to pretend. I cooked dinner. I laughed at Kevin's stories. I even watched a movie with him on the couch, his arm draped around me like we were still the same couple we used to be. But I wasn't the same. And neither was Jake. He'd brush past me on purpose. He'd lean in too close when handing me something. One night, when Kevin had gone to bed early, Jake lingered in the hallway outside my bedroom door. He didn't say anything, he didn't have to. The silence between us was louder than words. He was waiting for me to choose again. And I didn't know if I could trust myself not to. I tried journaling. I tried praying. I tried anything that would pull me back to who I used to be. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. Felt his breath. Heard his voice whispering things I should never have listened to. The truth is, I don't know what comes next. I'm living a lie, sleeping beside a man who has no idea what's happened under his roof. Every smile I give him is painted over with guilt. Every moment I spend alone with Jake feels like playing with fire all over again. But the worst part? A piece of me doesn't want to stop burning. Because once you taste something that wakes you up from a dead life, it's almost impossible to go back to sleep. 96L